My girlfriend Anaya and I, Jacob, had to wait nearly a year before finally getting matched with an energetic black lab named Trixie, but there were problems with our specially trained hearing dog from the get-go. How a hearing assist dog is supposed to work. Someone knocks at the front door and the dog informs the owner, in this case my girlfriend Anaya, by nudging her wet nose into her owner's leg. "What?" Anaya asks, spreading her hands. "Where?" Then the clever dog leads her to the source of the sound. Properly trained, a good hearing dog can alert its owner to the microwave, oven timer, doorbell, smoke alarm, any sound she's trained to recognize. Trixie, the black lab, we were assured, was one of the brightest dogs to ever come out of her training program. But she was a little too bright because she developed an unusual habit, alerting to sounds before they happened. The first time I was sitting on the sofa typing on my laptop when Trixie's head came up, ears perked, telltale signs of an impending alert. She raced over to Anaya, tail wagging, and nudged her, then led her to the front door. I frowned because I definitely didn't hear any knocking or the doorbell. Anaya dutifully looked out the peephole and then turned to Trixie and scolded, "No." She walked back to me and sighed. "False alert. She gave me one this morning while you were in the shower, too." False alerts can be a problem with hearing dogs, alerting to sounds that just aren't there, hoping to get treats, but Trixie just stood by the door and whined stubbornly as if insisting she was a good dog who'd done her job. I was about to suggest to Anaya we contact the assistance dog organization for advice when, ding dong, I almost jumped out of my seat. "There's someone at the door," I told Anaya. Trixie wagged her tail as we both hurried over, her tongue lolling in a puppy smile as we opened the door to find a UPS driver holding a package and a FedEx notice on the door as well. After pulling the notice off the door, Anaya gushed to me, "Gosh, maybe it wasn't a false alert this morning. Maybe she just alerted me too early, like now." "She must have heard the package carrier's footsteps on the sidewalk," I guessed. I marveled at Trixie. "Man, she's got phenomenal hearing." "Guess that's why they call them hearing dogs," joked Anaya. We gave Trixie her treat and told her good girl, and she ran a few triumphant circles before fixing us again with that doggy smile. From then on, every alert came early. Some of them made sense with her insanely good hearing. Or, as in the case of the smoke alarm, she alerted Anaya to a minute before it went off. Possibly it was due to her sensitive nose picking up the burning of the French toast. But the oven timer? How was she able to alert early to that? The phone ringing? Anaya seemed unconcerned. She simply declared that Trixie was a very special dog. But I found Trixie's early alerts to border on the uncanny. It was as if she was hearing the sounds before they happened. And then came yesterday. Anaya was called in to a work meeting, and since her boss has severe allergies to dogs, she left Trixie at home with me. I was sitting at the table on my laptop working on some reports when I felt a wet nose nudge my leg. I got up to ask Trixie what the sound was. Even though I'm not deaf, it's still a good idea to give Trixie the consistent practice, and she led me to the door, where I stood fully expecting to hear a knock or the bell in about a minute. Then Trixie growled. For context, I'd never heard her growl before. She makes a lot of sounds, whimpers, yips, and funny moans like she's talking, but she's a very good-natured pup and doesn't have a vicious bone in her body. Yet now she stood tense, head down and tail lowered, the hackles along her back raised, lips curled to show sharp teeth. She continued to stare straight at the door as if it weren't there and she could see right through it. And suddenly, it struck me that whatever made her growl like that would be here at the door in seconds. Panic hit me. I snatched Trixie by the collar and dragged her with me into our hidden closet under the staircase, the one we call our Harry Potter closet. I whispered to Trixie, "Lie down," and "Quiet." A soft growl continued to emanate from her, but I put my hand on her side and she quieted until she was almost inaudible, though I could still feel the vibrating deep in her body. There was the jingle of keys in a lock, and the front door opened. Footsteps. The cadence of those footsteps sounded like Anaya, but Trixie's low growl persisted. There was a small hole in the paneling of the stair closet, and I tried to peep through it, but all I could make out was a vague figure in the front entryway. Then the figure moved. The footsteps went up the stairs. into our bedroom, and the door closed. I heard the creak of the bed as Anaya, or someone else, laid down for a nap. My heart would not slow. Trixie was still growling. I heard her lick her lips in the dark, but why if that was Anaya? I sent a quick text. Me. Hey, where are you? Anaya. Home. You? Relief flooded my system. I almost came out then, but Trixie's soft whine stopped me. So I looked at my phone and hit the call button. I just needed to see my girlfriend on a video call or hear her voice. Upstairs, a merry jingle rang. Trixie jolted at the familiar ringtone. It was one of the sounds she was trained to alert to. Her nose dipped as if to nudge me, but then instead she licked her lips and stood still. For some reason, she didn't want to alert. Why wasn't Anaya picking up? After the call went unanswered, I sat for a moment, and then my phone vibrated with a text. Anaya. Hey. Anaya. Where are you? I remained still, heart hammering, trying to decide what to do, when suddenly Trixie lunged past me, slamming into the panel door and bursting out from under the staircase. Hey! I hissed, darting after her. But instead of running upstairs, Trixie ran straight to the front door. She scratched and pawed at the door, and there came a knock, and a voice from outside called, Hello, Jacob, I lost my purse. My phone and keys were in there. Can you open the... At the same time, just overheard, the bed creaked. Someone stood. Footsteps thumped rapidly across the floor. I yanked open the door and lunged out. Anaya stood startled on the front steps, and I snatched her hand, dragging her with me into a run. Trixie ran beside us. What's going on? Cried Anaya. There's someone in the house, I gasped as we pelted up the block. We didn't stop until we spotted a neighbor walking his dog. I fumbled with my phone and called the police and told them, frantic, out of breath, that someone was in our house, a stranger with a key in the upstairs bedroom. I signed as I spoke, and Anaya's eyes on me widened. Police arrived in a few minutes, but when we went back inside and searched upstairs and down, we found no trace of any intruder, just Anaya's phone left by the bed. It had no one's fingerprints but her own, nor had we seen anyone leave the house after our escape. We're staying with my parents now. We're still not sure who was in the house. After the whole strange incident, we're not taking any chances by going back. To be honest, I haven't really fully processed it all yet. I still don't understand how Trixie does those early alerts either, but all that matters is that thank God nothing terrible happened that day. Or should I say, thank dog. His Tinder profile said he was 45, but he looked to be in his early 30s at most. Looking for a sugar baby, $700 weekly, no sex. It sounded too good to be true, but as a broke university student, I was willing to take my chances. I swiped right, and Tinder let me know it was a match. His message came seconds later. Hey there, sweetheart. Cringed at that word. I hated it, but $700 was $700, so I sucked it up and replied. Hey. His name was Jack, and he told me he owned his own business, although he never specified what kind of business it was. We talked for a while before he asked me for my Venmo to send me the first payment. After a few minutes, I got the notification. I stared at the $700 for at least 20 minutes, expecting to wake up from a dream at any second, but it wasn't a dream. You still there? I clicked on the message. Yeah, sorry, if you don't mind me asking, what are you looking for in return? I stared at the chat until he replied, I'm just looking for you to do a few favors for me. That sounded like it was going to be sexual to me. Like what? For example, the first thing I need you to do is pick up a delivery for me. That sounded innocent enough, but I was still expecting there to be some kind of twist. $700 to pick up a package? Come on, even I wasn't that naive. From the post office or something? No, I'll send you the address, but I'd rather not do this through Tinder. You got Telegram? Or you can give me your number. Telegram? What was this, 2015? I decided to give him my number instead, and he texted me the address immediately, followed by the address to his house where I would have to drop off the package. I'm not home right now, but there's a key on the bottom of the blue flower pot near the door. Go inside and put the package on the coffee table in the living room. Make sure that you lock the door when you go inside the house, and then lock it again when you leave. I grabbed my car keys and wallet and got into my car, put the address into Google Maps. Got it. On my way. My phone buzzed as I backed out of my driveway. I'm serious. Lock the door both times, please. I thought that was a little excessive, but I promised him that I would. The house looked abandoned and had a broken chain link fence around it with a small door that was hanging on to dear life. It stuck out like a sore thumb, surrounded by houses that were a lot nicer than this one in comparison. You here for Jack's shit? I looked up to see a man standing in the open doorway of the house. He took up almost the entire space, his head skimming the top of the doorframe. He was huge in height and muscles, and his entire torso was covered in tattoos. Yeah, I guess, I replied, not moving from my spot on the sidewalk. Stay right there, he said. I did. I actually don't think I would have moved if he had asked me to. I looked around and realized that there was no one else on this street. I was a 21-year-old woman alone in the street. I gripped my car keys. A few minutes later, the man came back out carrying a cardboard box. It was about the size of a shoebox, but stained and damp on some of the corners. Can you open your car? He asked. I opened the trunk, not wanting that inside on my car seats, and he set it in. All right, there you go, he said. Thanks, I replied. I walked around to the driver's side of the car and opened the door. Oh, and one more thing, he said. I looked at him. Watch out, he said. I didn't reply. I blasted my music as I drove to Jack's house, hoping it would drown out my anxiety. It didn't. I parked my car on the stone driveway and stayed inside the car, admiring the house. It was a huge house with stone pillars on the front porch and the greenest grass I had ever seen in my life. I turned the car off and got out. I grabbed the package and walked to the front door, getting the key from where he said it would be. I opened the door and stepped in, closing it behind me. I thought about what he had said about locking the door when I got inside. I thought that was a little overboard, but as I stared at the closed door, something made me reach out and lock it. I walked inside, my feet cushioned by the thick maroon carpet, and admired the inside of the house. All the furniture was wooden and looked incredibly expensive. I set the package down on the coffee table, and as I walked back to the door, I heard a phone ringing from somewhere inside the house. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I took it out to look. Don't answer any calls that aren't from Marvin. I put my phone back and followed the sound of the phone, poking my head into a few different rooms before I found it in an office. I walked over to the desk and looked at the caller ID. Incoming call from Jack. That was odd. I grabbed my phone to look at the message again. I was starting to get a little bit creeped out and decided I wouldn't answer just to be safe and left the house, remembering to lock the door as I left. I've done a few more favors for Jack since then. I drove a BMW to a random park in another city, only to get out and drive a different car back to Jack's house. He had me meet one of his employees at lunch, who then gave me a briefcase to deliver to the first house I had gone to and told me he would know if I looked inside. On several occasions, he asked me to drive down to that same house and stay with the guy whose name was Julio for a certain amount of time. In total, I've made around $3,500. Most recently, Jack asked me to stay in his house overnight. I woke up to a text message from him. I need you to spend the night at my house. I hadn't ever seen him in person, but I had talked to him on the phone a few times. He proceeded to tell me he would pay me $1,000 to spend the night at his house, provided that I follow a few rules. I drove to his house that evening. The driveway was empty, as it normally was, but the porch light was on. I walked up, unlocked the door, went inside, and then locked it again. Everything in the house looked the same. Jack had told me over the phone that he would leave the list of rules on the dining room table. I set all my stuff down in the living room. My bags looked like garbage compared to the fancy furniture there. I wandered into the kitchen and then into the dining room. Sure enough, there was a piece of paper on the wooden table held down by an empty glass. Lock the door when you come in. Only answer calls from Marvin. Don't turn on any faucets between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. If the door to the closet at the end of the hall is open, sleep in the library. If closed, sleep in any of the bedrooms. The gardener comes at midnight. If he starts knocking on the windows, hide. Turn the TV on and let it play on static through the night. Do not forget to do this. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. I'll pay you in the morning. Good night. I made sure to follow all the rules. To be honest, I was regretting my decision, but seeing as I was already here and I was getting paid, I decided to stay anyway. I figured as long as I follow all the rules, I'd be perfectly fine. Still, it felt a little odd. What was this, a haunted house? Nevertheless, I lounged around the house for a few hours as I was planning on going to sleep around 9 since that's the time that all the weird crap would begin to happen. At 8:50, I brushed my teeth using the faucet for the last time before 9. I checked the closet in the hallway, and upon seeing that it was open, I moved my stuff into the library and got ready to sleep on the couch. I locked the doors just in case and laid on the couch scrolling through my phone. I hadn't gotten any more messages from Jack, and I started to think up scenarios and reasons as to why he had such strict, peculiar sets of rules in his house. I dozed off at some point because at exactly 10:16 p.m., I was woken up by the doorbell ringing. I was about to get up to check, but then I remembered the rule. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter who they say they are, after 10 p.m. I stayed on the couch, trying not to move, paranoid that they would hear even the slightest sound. "It's the police! Open up!" I didn't move. "Hello, it's the police! Open up or we're coming in!" I still didn't move, but I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. There was silence for a while after that. Then the doorbell rang again. "Hey, it's Jack. Let me in." It sounded like Jack, but still, I didn't get up. He would have a key, wouldn't he? Why would he need me to let him in? This continued for almost a full hour. Different people would ring the doorbell, announce themselves, and then disappear when I didn't respond. I was finally able to fall asleep, and the gardener never came. When I woke up the next morning, I heard someone in the kitchen. I got up slowly and unlocked the door as quietly as possible, taking my phone with me and walking across the living room and into the kitchen. I stopped at the entrance and peered in. It was Jack. He was standing in front of the stove stirring something as the coffee machine brewed coffee on the counter behind him. "Hey, good morning," he said when he saw me. "Hi," I replied, nervous. I hadn't seen him in person before, but he looked exactly like his picture online. "Scrambled eggs?" he asked, motioning to the pan with a wooden spoon. "Yeah, thanks," I replied, walking over to take the plate from him. I ate my breakfast and drank some coffee in silence. "So, how was it?" he asked. "It was okay. Nothing super freaky happened," I replied. "Cool," he replied. There was an awkwardness in the room. "I think I'm gonna go now. I have class." I trailed off. I didn't, but I really wanted to get out of there. "Oh, no, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you some other time," he replied. I grabbed my stuff and he walked me to my car. I could see him standing in the driveway, staring at me as I left. When I got home, I unpacked all my stuff and noticed that I still had the list with me. I sat on my bed and read it again. I felt my body tense up as I realized that I had forgotten something. Turn the TV on and let it play on static through the night. Do not forget to do this. Turn the TV on and let it play on static through the night. Do not forget to do this. Do not forget to do this. I stared at the words on the page until they lost meaning. Beside me, my phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. It was the $1,000 payment. I looked at my phone and then back at the list. Maybe it wasn't an important step? As I was thinking this over, a text from Jack came in. "I'm not in town right now. I should be back next week, so you're free from running any more errands for me until then. Just sent the payment. Go do something fun." I stared at the message and read it again and again. And once more for good measure. I'm not in town right now. I thought back to this morning and how Jack was in his house, how he gave me breakfast. I'm not in town right now. Within minutes, a new text came in, this time from a number that I didn't recognize. "Did you forget to do something?" The text was followed by a picture of Jack, or whoever this version of Jack was, standing in front of the TV. I didn't respond. Next came another picture. This one was of the outside of my house. It was followed by another text. "Watch out." I think my roommate is a cannibal. For context, I met Thomas when we were randomly assigned to be roommates our freshman year of college. Nothing seemed to be off with him back then. Yeah, he was out a lot and came back late at night, but I always figured he was just having fun with friends. It's not like I wasn't doing the same. We had 4 semesters of living on campus, 2 years. In that time, he never struck me as particularly eccentric. Maybe a few little things, like how he never put any food in our mini fridge, but nothing that warranted genuine concern. It wasn't until we moved into an apartment that things started to become strange. I moved in about a week after he did, a few days before classes were going to start. I was supposed to come in at the same time, but my aunt died and I needed to help my dad with some aftermath there. It would have kept me longer had the start of the semester not snuck up, but that's beside the point. We viewed the apartment together initially, and it was a pretty nice, cozy place. Not exactly modern, but sure as hell cheap enough to make it worth it without said price being shady. Neither of us were bothered. But when I was finally able to move in, the place looked worse for the wear somehow. Significant enough that I noticed immediately. The paint in some places had started chipping severely, something Thomas didn't even react to when I pointed out. The floors were mostly fine, but a few of the boards creaked particularly loud, which I hadn't noticed at our viewing. Again, enough that it bothered me, and still not enough for Thomas to give a damn about it. Then there was the fact that the lock to the remaining bedroom, mine, was broken. A problem not very easily fixable on a college budget. I asked Thomas about that one, making sure he actually answered me, but he just kind of shrugged it off and told me he hadn't noticed it. But still, okay, whatever, weird, but probably not a big deal besides losing our security deposit. It didn't matter. The semester started, and the weeks progressed. And that was when I started noticing things about Thomas. Living in an apartment instead of a dorm was the most distant he'd ever been. It's not like he was ever super talkative, but now it seemed like he'd only glance my way and move on, unwilling to do more. In fact, he only really talked to me if it was to snap at me about being clean or quiet. With the former, he was only a little bit of a clean freak back in our dorm. Incessant about his own side, but he only got really pressed about it if any of my mess seeped into his. Here and now, though, it really shined through how bad it was. He never touched my room or anything, but the rest of the apartment had to be spotless or he'd be pissed. A few times more recently, he'd thrown out my stuff because I hadn't touched it in too long, whatever that means. Nothing devastating, but one of those things was a spare charger I had to dig out of the trash and then get sprayed down with Febreze. Nothing short of annoying is what I'm getting at. Why he suddenly became really anal about it was anyone's guess at that point. As for the quiet part, that was an entirely new issue. Thomas never gave a damn if I was loud while playing a game before, but suddenly now it was worth slamming my door open without knocking over. I asked him to maybe be a little more polite about the issue when it came up, but I was again sort of just brushed off. Still, it rubbed me the wrong way how suddenly angry he was getting about the issue. Yes, it was my fault, and I got better about it, but what the hell was with the switch up? Yet, I still just wrote it off. Maybe he had some mental or emotional stuff going on he didn't want to talk about. I could be patient with him, sure. But it got worse. A roommate who clearly labels what food is his in the fridge is nothing to be mad about. Still, a few weeks into the year, I did a deep clean of the refrigerator, one that, to be fair, I had meant to do as soon as I moved in, but it was too late for that, and now I had to take everything out to scrub it down. Only a few things were his, most of them in the freezer. I took them out, setting them aside to clean up quickly so nothing went bad. Probably no reason to worry about that, but whatever. Once I was done, I was checking over everything as I put it back in when I noticed something with his name on it had an especially pungent smell. It was awful enough that it made my nose instinctively wrinkle up. I put it back down, hastily shoving everything back into the fridge before turning to it. Nothing really weird, just a piece of meat and tight saran wrap that looked to still be a little bloody. Frowning, I started unwrapping it to make sure Thomas hadn't put rotten meat in the freezer. The odor only got more foul as I did. It was a smell difficult to describe. Though it was what I was worried about, it didn't smell like rotting meat. It just smelled like death. Before I actually unwrapped the whole thing, it had a lot of layers, something I only questioned after the fact. Thomas came home and stopped dead in the doorway. "Why are you touching my shit?" He stormed over after a second, snatching the meat off the table and immediately starting to rewrap it. His hands were shaking. "It smells disgusting, man," I told him, stepping back a little. "I wanted to check it wasn't rotten." "It's not. I'm on a diet," he snapped. "Don't take my food." "I wasn't taking it," I hissed back. "Don't touch it." Thomas stuffed the meat back into the freezer at that, then swiftly retreated to his room, barely opening the door and sliding through, leaving me to scrub my hands of that horrible stench. It was then that I really got suspicious of Thomas. The other weird things layered onto that incident that made me start observing him closer. I wasn't trying to stalk my roommate by any means, but looking past the surface made me notice some more things. How half the creaking boards were in front of his room. How he always slipped into his room like he was hiding something in there. That most of his labeled food had that same disgusting odor of death when I checked. Well, sniff test them. After the first time, I was a little scared to unwrap another one. Maybe it was stupid, but I'd read online somewhere that a reason for creaking floorboards could be that they had recently been lifted up. So another little investigation started, this one intentional. When Thomas left for class, I started checking under the boards, and it wasn't long before I turned up something. A handsaw. Off-putting thing to be hiding under my feet, to say the least. It looked pretty well worn, clean, but used. Aside from the saw lifting the board let me see a mysterious reddish-brown blotch stained into the underside of it. That was enough for me to put the board back and stop thinking about it for now, at least until I could come up with a plan. I had a film major buddy, and I managed to convince him to let me use an old video camera for his science. I hid it in a plant and aimed it at the door to Thomas's bedroom at leg level. Set up to stay at said friends for the night, and then let it play out. In hindsight, a mediocre video camera was a really crappy pick for this, but it did the job enough. I didn't get a live feed or anything, and I was left to wallow in anxiety the whole night, but when I got back while Thomas was out the next day, I could dig the camera out and watch what it showed me, after charging it anyway. It caught 8 hours of footage before dying. Most of it was nothing, which I sped through until Thomas was suddenly pulling up the floorboard. I jumped back and let the video play. Thomas walked into frame, emotionlessly kneeling down and yanking the floorboard up, pulling the handsaw out and putting it down again. He walked into his room, seemingly stowing it away, then left again for another hour or so. When he came back, there was a woman our age with him. They were talking quietly enough that the video camera didn't pick up the words, but I could make a guess what it was about. They disappeared into his bedroom, the lock clicking loudly. It remained quiet for another moment before the worst, most horrible, unsurprising sound met my ears. A woman's scream being cut short. I could barely watch the next 2 hours of footage, all that remained before the camera died, but I did. I sat there in horror watching Thomas's legs walk between his bedroom, the kitchen, and the door over and over again, bringing things, wrapping up pieces of meat. At one point near the end, stopping to sit at the table and eat something. I could only guess what. I think typing this out has helped me process it a little, but Thomas is going to be home from his class soon. I'm kind of terrified to leave the room when he's here. I'm worried he knows that I've figured him out, or at least under enough suspicion to warrant police investigation. I can't confront him, that's a horrible idea, but I think I hear his keys jingling, so I'm going to have to pass him if I want to go to the cops. Wish me luck. If there's no update, well, you know what happened to me.